The price of endurance. I once believed something incredibly foolish, that a strong woman must know how to endure, that if I were patient enough, forgiving enough, sacrificial enough, a man would eventually wake up and change. I was 30. I had a position, a stable income, an apartment in my own name. And I chose him. I didn't need a man to provide for me. Seemed mature and responsible at first glance. I didn't love with my heart. I loved with my logic. I thought, as long as he's decent, that's enough. I was wrong. The tragedy didn't come on our wedding day. It didn't come when I gave birth. It came when he went bankrupt. His company collapsed. The phone calls piled up. The debts mounted. His sighs stretched past midnight. At first, I truly felt for him. I cooked more. I tried to come home earlier. I told him, it's okay, we'll rebuild. But he didn't rebuild. He chose to collapse. And worse, he dragged the whole family down with him. From a quiet, composed man, he became sharp and hostile. His words grew edges. It's because you're always at work. You look down on me. I married the wrong person. I was stunned. I worked 8 hours, then 10. I paid for electricity, water, milk, tuition. I paid the mortgage on the apartment in my name. I never once asked him for a cent. Yet he still saw himself as the victim. Alcohol began appearing in the house more often than meals. Beer bottles rolled under the table. The smell of liquor seeped into the walls, into our clothes, into my child's hair. Some nights he slammed the table just because I said, maybe try looking for a job again. He looked at me like I was the enemy. My son, only a few years old. He didn't understand what bankruptcy meant. He only knew that when his father shouted, his heart would jump in fear. Every time the door opened, he looked at me first. If my eyes were tense, he would go quiet. If his father's voice rose, he would run to cling to my legs. Once I heard him whisper, Mom, does Dad hate me? I couldn't answer. I held him tightly, my heart feeling crushed. But I stayed, because I thought, men are fragile when they fail. He just needs time. Family isn't something you walk away from. I lied to myself with moral slogans. I defended him to friends. I said he was stressed. I said he was just temporarily lost. But the truth, each day, I felt myself shrinking. I started speaking more softly. I avoided arguments. I began apologizing, even when I wasn't wrong. I was afraid my child would hear the fights, afraid the neighbors would hear the shouting, afraid others would know my marriage was cracking. I preserved appearances, but I lost my self-respect. One evening, he hurled the remote control onto the floor because the TV signal cut out. My child jumped and burst into tears. I screamed, "That's enough." He turned to me, eyes bloodshot. "You think you're so capable? Without me, could you even survive?" That sentence stabbed straight through me, not because I feared I couldn't survive, but because I realized he saw me as an opponent. We were no longer husband and wife. We were two wounded people under the same roof, exhausted, hurting but no longer loving. Every night I lay staring at the ceiling. Beside me was the man I once trusted, yet I felt lonelier than when I was single. I began imagining life without him. Silence, no shouting, no smell of alcohol, no watching the clock for his return. Then I startled at my own thoughts. I accused myself of being selfish. A child needs a father. I can't let my child grow up without a complete family. But what is a complete family? A house filled with yelling? A child who flinches at the sound of a man's footsteps? I stood between two fears, fear of divorce, and fear of continuing like this. I chose silence, and that silence killed me a little more each day. I was no longer the confident woman of 30. I became a walking shadow, a mother bracing herself as a human shield, a wife clinging to something already rotting from within. I thought I was enduring for my child, but deep in my heart, I knew I was enduring out of fear. Fear of starting over, fear of judgment, fear of being seen as a failure in marriage. And I didn't realize that the price of endurance is not tears. It is dignity. It is youth. It is my child's childhood, being worn away day by day. And this was only the beginning. The night I woke up that night began like any other. A cold dinner, a husband absent even while sitting in the house, a child slightly tired, but still trying to finish her bowl of porridge. I had grown used to that vague, lingering unease, but I didn't know that night was the limit. Around p.m., my child started running a high fever. I checked her temperature, 39°C. I shook him. "Hey, she has a fever." He mumbled something. The sharp smell of alcohol lingered in the air. He turned over and pulled the blanket over his head. I told myself, it's fine. I can handle it. Half an hour later, my child began to convulse. Her tiny body trembled in waves. Her eyes rolled back. Foam gathered at her mouth. In that moment, I was no longer a strong woman. I was a mother watching her world collapse. I shouted his name. No response. I called him 10 times, 20 times. The midnight roads felt endless. Yellow streetlights. Somewhere, the distant siren of an ambulance reminded me I wasn't the only one panicking. But at that moment, the world was only me and my child. In the emergency room, my hand shook as I signed the papers. The doctor asked, "Where is her father?" I choked. I wanted to say, "He's sleeping," but I couldn't force the words out. 3 a.m. My child passed the danger. She lay quietly on the hospital bed, and 4 needles still in her tiny hand. I sat beside her, watching every fragile breath. My phone showed no missed calls from my husband. Not one message. Not a single word. How is she? I didn't cry. My tears had dried long before. 3:10 a.m. I called a taxi to take us home. The door opened. The living room lights were still on. A soccer commentator's voice murmured softly from the iPad on the table. He was lying on the sofa, sound asleep, one hand still holding the remote. I stood there, just stood there. I didn't wake him, didn't scream, didn't question. I looked at the man I once called my husband, and I realized a cold truth. I had been alone in my own marriage. I didn't have a husband. I just had one more burden I needed to protect my child from. I carried my child into the bedroom, changed her clothes, laid her down gently. Then I sat alone on the balcony. It was nearly dawn. The city began to stir with early traffic, but inside me was a thick, suffocating darkness. I remembered every time I had defended him, every time I said, "He's just stressed," every time I told my child, "Dad loves you." I had lied to my child. I had lied to myself. In that moment, something inside me snapped. Not love, hope. The next morning, I printed out the divorce papers. I placed them on the dining table. He woke up, still slightly hungover. He looked at the paper, then at me. No anger, no panic, just a faint smirk. "You want a divorce?" I nodded. He leaned back in his chair. 1 billion. I thought I had misheard. "I'll sign if you give me 1 billion. Not because he loved me, not because he wanted to save the marriage, just a negotiation. I looked at that man for a long time. I didn't recognize him anymore. Or maybe, I had never truly known who he was. My heart didn't ache. It turned cold, cold like a block of ice sinking to the bottom of my chest. He continued, "You think you've won? Go to court. I'll demand a property split. I'll fight for custody. You think you're guaranteed to win?" Each sentence was a cut. He knew my weakness, my child. He knew exactly what I feared most, and he pressed right there. I stayed silent, not because I was weak, but because I was calculating. If we go to court, how many months? How much money? How many times will my child have to hear her parents tear each other apart? I felt like I was standing between two doors. On one side, a legal battle. On the other, a price tag. Both painful. He stood up, walked past me, and added, "You think living alone is easy?" It wasn't a challenge. It was a curse. And the pressure began to tighten. I went to work that day like a lifeless shell. I attended meetings. I smiled. I replied to emails. But in my head, one number kept repeating, 1 billion. I opened my bank account. I calculated. I thought about loans, about my mother helping repay the apartment debt. I felt cornered. He didn't need to shout anymore. Just a number, a perfect trap. I began losing sleep. Every night I lay awake listening to my child's breathing. Afraid he would change his mind. Afraid he would really drag me to court. Afraid he would suddenly play the role of a repentant father. The pressure didn't explode. It bled slowly. I lost my appetite, spoke less, started panicking for no reason. I understood. The night my child convulsed was not the only night I woke up. It was just the beginning, and the real storm had not yet arrived. 1 billion Vietnamese dongs and Freedom Own Week. Those 7 days felt like 7 years. I lived in the same house as the man who was waiting for my money. No more arguments, no more shouting, only a poisonous silence. He walked past me like a winner. Sometimes he'd throw out half-joking, half-threatening lines. "Have you prepared enough yet? Don't make me change my mind. Each sentence tightened around my chest. I looked at my child sleeping. I looked at my bank balance. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked exhausted, but her eyes were no longer confused, only determined. I understood something very clearly. If I didn't pay the price today, I would pay with another 10 years of my youth. On the morning of the 7th day, I sat in front of the banking screen. The number appeared. 1000. My hands trembled, not because I regretted the money, but because I was officially admitting this marriage had died a long time ago, and I had buried myself with it for years. I thought about all the times I swallowed my tears, all the times I said, "It's fine," all the times my child clung to me after hearing his father slam the table. I wasn't paying him. I was paying for my own foolishness. For the years I chose endurance instead of confrontation. For the illusion that a family must have both parents to be happy. I took a deep breath, pressed transfer. The screen read, "Transaction successful." No fireworks, no tears, just a feeling of free fall. 3 days later, he threw the signed divorce papers onto the table. "It's done. You win." I looked at that signature, just a few strokes of ink, worth 1 billion VN. He smirked. "You'll regret this. A woman raising a child alone isn't easy." For the first time in years, I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "I've been alone for a long time." The air in the room thickened. He said nothing more. I went into the bedroom and packed our things. Each folded shirt peeled off a layer of the past. Each item placed into the suitcase closed a chapter of my life. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I was so calm it surprised even me. On the last night in that house, I lay beside my child. No more worrying about him coming home late. No more bracing for the sound of a door slamming. No more fearing an argument exploding. Only my child's steady breathing. And I realized, peace has its own sound. The next morning, I took my child and left. No drama, no farewell, just a door closing. I moved into a smaller apartment. My savings dropped significantly. I had to work extra. I had to calculate every expense. Some nights I was exhausted, but no longer afraid. No longer forced to hear the voice of the man who once hurt me. My child began sleeping better. No more waking up startled at night. No more asking, "Is Dad angry?" I saw that change clearly, and I knew I hadn't been wrong. People asked me, "Don't you feel stupid for giving him the money?" I smiled. Stupid? Stupid is staying when you know you're being worn down. Stupid is believing silence will earn kindness. Stupid is letting your child grow up and shouting and convincing yourself it will get better. Is 1 billion VN a lot? Yes. But my dignity is worth more. My child's childhood is worth more. I'm not proud that I paid. I'm proud that I finally chose myself. Freedom has a price. But living in mental hell every day, paying with self-doubt, with panic attacks, with the fear in your child's eyes, that's far more expensive. If you ask me whether I regret it, yes. I regret not leaving the first time he made my child afraid. I regret putting pride above happiness. I regret teaching my child that endurance equals love. But I don't regret that 1 billion. Because from the day I walked out of that house, I no longer had to teach my child how to live in fear. I teach my child how to leave when hurt. And if you're reading this, if you're telling yourself, just endure a little longer, if you fear other people's judgment more than your own pain, if your child is witnessing a toxic marriage every day, ask yourself, are you saving money? Or are you paying for your life in installments of silence? Don't argue that all men are like that. Don't justify staying for the sake of the child. A child doesn't need a complete house. A child needs a safe one. And if you had to choose between money and peace, what would you choose? Be honest. Would you dare to leave if it came at a cost? Or would you keep calling endurance a sacrifice? I see that this story has a few points that need clarification. First, under the law, a child under 36 months old is almost automatically placed with the mother, unless she is deemed unfit. If the husband does not have stable employment, his chances of gaining custody are very low. Therefore, saying that she feared losing custody does not sound entirely convincing. Second, if the apartment was acquired before marriage, registered under one person's name, and clearly proven to have been purchased through a bank loan with financial support from her family to repay it, then it is not automatically subject to equal division. If the husband wants a share, he must prove his specific contribution, which is not easy. Third, 1 billion VN is not a small amount. If it was paid merely in exchange for a signature on divorce papers, that seems unreasonable. because unilateral divorce is legally possible through proper procedures. However, if it was part of a negotiated property settlement to avoid prolonged disputes, that is a different matter. In that case, it could be viewed as the price paid to end all entanglements. I think the key distinction here is whether the money was paid to obtain a divorce or to settle property matters once and for all. Those are two very different things. Emotions are understandable, but from a legal perspective, the story needs clearer details to avoid misunderstandings. If someone truly wants a divorce, they can file unilaterally. There is no need to buy a signature. The law allows it, and the court will proceed if the marriage is seriously deteriorated. If 1 billion VN was involved, it should be understood as a property settlement rather than a divorce fee. A child under 36 months old is almost certainly placed with the mother if she has stable income. An unemployed husband would have very little chance, so the fear of losing custody may be somewhat exaggerated. Property acquired before marriage, registered under one person's name, with clear loan documentation, is not automatically divided. The other party must prove concrete contributions, which is not as easy as many assume. 1 billion VN is significant. If it was given simply out of fear of litigation, that would be an emotional decision, but if it was the price to avoid years of legal battles, then it becomes a strategic choice. I wonder, if the husband is unemployed, where would he find the financial resources and time to pursue a long legal battle? Litigation is not cheap. Sometimes threats are merely psychological tactics. Divorce does not require mutual consent if there is sufficient evidence that the marriage has irreparably broken down. Therefore, saying without his signature, divorce is impossible reflects a misunderstanding of the law. The real issue may have been the desire for a faster, cleaner resolution. If the apartment was financed through a bank loan and supported by her mother in repayment, then the financial evidence is clear. The likelihood of losing the entire property is very low. Courts rely on documents, not emotions. Holding a stable managerial position with reliable income, she likely had sufficient legal and financial capacity to pursue litigation if necessary. Choosing to pay may have been about ending things quickly rather than lacking leverage. Perhaps the 1 billion VN was not a divorce fee but a mutually agreed property settlement to prevent future disputes. Seen from that perspective, it makes much more sense. Emotions in the story are easy to sympathize with, but legally speaking, many details are not entirely persuasive. Divorce is a legal right. No one can withhold it by demanding money. If money was exchanged, it must have been about property settlement, not permission to divorce. That said, it is easy to speak from the outside. When someone is trapped in a toxic marriage, what they need most is a quick escape. 1 billion VN may be a large sum, but time, mental health, and a child's peaceful upbringing may be worth even more. Yes, the law allows unilateral divorce, but litigation can last 6 months, a year, or even longer. During that time, they may still have to live together and face each other daily. Not everyone can endure that. We should be cautious about judging decisions without living in the same circumstances. Some psychological pressures cannot be measured by legal provisions or paperwork. Paying money is not necessarily weakness. Sometimes it is the most rational decision, choosing the fastest solution with the least emotional damage. Outsiders may see it as illogical, but those inside the situation understand the exhaustion. If 1 billion VN truly buys lasting peace, for many people, that is a price they are willing to pay.